I was thinking to myself, I should make a fused 4x4. I've solved a fused 3x3 before, so a fused 4x4 would be a nice solving challenge. I looked around on the internet to see how others have made fused 4x4s in the past. Surprisingly, it appears all of the documented ones have been made from Rubik's branch 4x4s, which have an entirely different mechanism from current speed cubes. I couldn't even find any videos of the finished puzzles. So I bought 2 MF4Cs and thought I'd set off on making one in my own way, and I'll show you how so you can make a fused 4x4 for yourself if you'd like. Modern 4x4s are actually 5x5s on their insides. The 5x5's additional edges and centers are internal pieces, and the centers are built so that the internal pieces move with a certain predetermined corner. The first thing I did was find this corner, which is fairly simple. You just see with which corner the central screws move. Once I found it, I marked it with a marker so that I wouldn't lose it later on. I then also found the corner on the other 4x4, and interestingly, it was on a completely different corner in terms of the color scheme. I then took one of the 4x4s and superglued together the 2x2 section surrounding the core corner. The fused 4x4 is actually a bandage mod, and as with any bandage mod, you have to make sure the bandaged pieces cannot separate. I then disassembled the puzzle to look at the mechanism, and also superglued the pieces from the inside so they would have a stronger bond. The ultimate goal was to make this superglued block share the space of a single corner block with the same superglued block from the other 4x4. The issue I discovered, however, is that after slimming the block down, there simply wouldn't be much material left. To fix that, I decided to glue internal pieces to the corner block, which would give me more material to work with in all 3 dimensions. The internal pieces normally move with this corner block anyway, so gluing them to the block doesn't restrict any additional movement. To make the job more precise, I put the internal pieces in the hidden layer of the 4x4, and then added superglue on top, onto which I placed the block. This ensured that everything would be properly aligned once the superglue dried. After the 3 sets of internal pieces were firmly attached to the corner block, I had a piece that I was much more confident about cutting into without compromising the mechanism. Also, I did all of the previous steps to the other 4x4 in this mod to bring it up to speed. I modeled different kinds of cuts in Onshape and decided to simply cut the 2x2 block in half diagonally. I marked the puzzle with how the cut was going to look and then simply sawed it based on the marks. Here's one that I've already done. The surface is still a bit bumpy because I haven't sanded it down, but the general shape is definitely there. I cut the other corner block and then sanded it down to make it smooth. Afterwards, I reassembled one of the puzzles with the sanded corner block. This made it easier to see how I needed to sand down the other corner block so that the final result wouldn't be crooked. Once both of the surfaces were flat, I connected them using some epoxy sculpt and superglue, and let it all dry overnight. Once everything had set, I reassembled the other 4x4 and the puzzle was done. I turned all the axes to make sure nothing was glued together when it shouldn't be, and it turned out that everything worked exactly as it should. When I was planning this build, I thought it was going to be somewhat of a challenge, since 4x4s are generally not favored for modding due to the large amount of internal pieces they have. Additionally, since nobody has ever posted anything about making a fused 4x4 in this way before, I was on my own in terms of choosing what to do. It was therefore a bit surprising to me that everything I tried simply worked, and that there weren't really any unforeseen problems. Anyway, now that it's all done, I think the fused 4x4 looks really nice. The connection between the two 4x4s looks seamless from the outside, with the faces lining up excellently. I'm also very impressed by how well the puzzle turns. The turning quality doesn't really seem to be any worse than that of the unmodded 4x4s it was made from. You may have noticed that, except for white and yellow, the colors don't match up between the two cubes. This is actually unintentional since, as you saw earlier, I fused the cubes at the corners that are connected to their cores. The mismatch doesn't really bother me, and I think it could even add to the solving difficulty, since when solving the second cube you can't just look at the first one to see where the colors should go. I don't know how difficult the fused 4x4 is to solve, but I do have several ideas about how I could solve it. However, I can't solve it when it's in the solved state, so let's go ahead and scramble it. After scrambling the fused 4x4, I decided to play around with it for a bit and try some of the methods I'd planned to use. First, I tried reducing it to 2x2 by connecting all of the pieces within the 2x2 blocks. That quickly became very tedious though, so I switched to my second plan of trying to solve it like a normal 4x4 with some minor adjustments for the bandaging. That method ended up actually working, and as you can see I've solved half of the puzzle. Now, I'll solve the second half and explain what I'm doing along the way. So the first thing I'll do is solve the centers, just like on a 4x4. The only quirk in this step is that it's best to first solve the centers next to the fused corner, because they are a bit harder to maneuver than the others. The centers are done, so it's time to pair the edges. I'm going to leave the edges next to the fused corner for last, because they require a bit of special attention. Now that the three single edges are the only ones left unpaired, I'm going to put them in their places. It's best to do this now, as it would be more difficult to move them around later in the solve. So, now that all the centers are built and the edges are paired, the puzzle is fully reduced. While a normal 4x4 reduces to 3x3, this fused 4x4 reduces to a fused 3x3. just like on a fused 3x3, I can turn the 3 outer faces to move the reduced edges around, and obviously the corners are the same. So I'm going to solve it just I would solve a fused 3x3, which I'm not going to go in great detail about. And it's solved! I actually got a flipped edge parity, which turned out to be somewhat difficult to fix. Besides that though, it was a fairly uneventful reduced fused 3x3 solve. Overall, I'm very satisfied with this puzzle. It's quite a lot of fun to build and solve, and if you're interested, I definitely recommend trying to make one yourself, as it's not an incredibly complicated mod. But anyway, thank you all very much for watching, and have a great day.